World Cup, because we know that that's going to be, again, a lot of
Considering Australian timings, I'm sure midnight pizza delivery would be
all of that, yeah, absolutely. I mean, IPL, hopefully, IPL is more conducive for Indian pizza delivery, right? Um, so with the customer analytics, which addresses all these dimensions, which is the behavior segmentation, the taste segmentation, seasonal, as well as life cycle, you can do very targeted communication, right? So when you send your messaging, you are actually sending it to the right audience with the right product, more importantly, at the right time. So the hit rate, so to speak, is is you know is basically night and day difference between mass marketing. Okay, okay. So what is the business impact of all this? So what we have been able to demonstrate successfully is, if you look at a year-on-year store growth in terms of revenue, and this is something that we also have. If you go to our website capillarytech.com, we have all the case studies out there for all of the customers we work with. And if you look at the Pizza Hut case study, which is publicly available, we have demonstrated a 4 to 5% year-on-year store growth with the customer analytics approach, right? And the way we generate the ROI or prove the ROI is again through standard industry techniques, which is a typical test and control strategy, right? So in other words, we always have a control group of about 10% of the audience for whom we don't send the messaging. The test group is typically 90%, which is again industry accepted standards. And then using comparative approaches for these two groups, we're able to demonstrate, hey, this is the ROI. Everything we do, so in other words, even the way we get compensated is through an outcome, positive outcome-based pricing, right? So in other words, we demonstrate, we agree upon certain ROI results, we prove it, and then we are compensated based on achievement of those targets. So if you look at the typical life cycle of a pizza consumer, you have a new customer, or then you go through the acquisition, and the goal is to ensure that the active customer becomes a loyal customer, right? And to get them to be a loyal customer, that's where you have all your promotions and your tactics, marketing tactics, to get them to be repeat buyers. Otherwise, what happens is your active customer very soon may become a dormant customer. And the pizza industry actually has certain definitions for when an active customer becomes a dormant or inactive customer, and also when an inactive customer becomes a lapsed customer. So typically, if the person doesn't transact for 90 days, that's when he moves into the dormant status. If he doesn't transact for 180 days, 6 months, he becomes an inactive customer. And typically, if he doesn't transact for 1 year, you stop messaging to that person. So in other words, he becomes a lost customer, which means even if he comes back, he's treated then as a new customer or active customer, right? The lifecycle marketer basically addresses, there are 6 cycles here, which is acquire, win back, and preventing the dormant, and again winning back and preventing the inactive, and upgrading to loyal. So we'll talk about these 6 stages, if you will, within the life cycle later on when we talk about micro-segmentation. Okay, so from a database perspective, one of the things we do is, of course, data collation from multiple sources. Then we have our own data warehouse. We call it the MDW, or the Marketing Data Warehouse. We are a SaaS product, by the way, so all of our stuff lies in the cloud. And so one of the first things we do is we collate all of the transaction data from various sources. The transaction data in this case can come from, your typical POS, point of sale systems, which the pizza carrier is using in that particular geography. So that has the order information. It also has the transaction information. It has the inventory information. And we also use various third-party data sources. So for instance, feedback may be done by a third-party agency. So when the guy, let's say, gets a bill printed, there may be something that says, hey, you send us your feedback, we'll give you 15% off in your next transaction. So that feedback is actually collated by someone else, but we actually use that data, right? Demographics, of course, this is like things like household income, which may be at the zip code level. In some countries like UK, you can even get it at the street level. It really is very geo-specific. We can use weather information, you can use event information, which is all, again, available through various public sources. So once we get all of this, we collate all of these, different data sources into our warehouse. One of the things we do as part of that is, of course, do standard deduplication, because the same customer may be identified in different ways. I'll talk about some, these are all standard techniques that you do anyway as part of any cleanup. But then we do the data augmentation in 3 dimensions, which is, your product, your behavior. Behavior is where we have all our intelligence for segmentation take place, right? So we do the customer profiling, and then we do the micro segmentation. And the third is the location, which is your standard, because pizza is very address specific, because the delivery business knows exactly where it needs to go, right? So there we can augment with the demographic data. We obviously do the geocoding. With the geocoding, you can then do things like catchment analysis to understand, where the competitors are, where exactly your target base is, and how exactly they're coming to, maybe the pizzeria that is serving that particular locality or area. You can also do things like heat map analysis in terms of understanding where the gaps are, whether you have enough saturation, whether it's in terms of your delivery. You can also do things like, hey, what is your average delivery time for your catchment area? If it's the standard delivery time is 30 minutes, because anything more than that is considered very bad, because it affects not just customer sentiment, it affects customer loyalty, because they typically switch if they find consistently that the pizza is being delivered late.
I have a question here.
Yeah?
You spoke about the 30-minute timeline, right?
Yes.
Isn't that something that the companies themselves have put forth? I mean, it's not my expectation till I figured that all the companies are doing a 30-minute delivery. So isn't that came from the pizza manufacturers?
Actually, it comes from the franchise. So pizza, again, is a very franchised business. So the independent franchise owners try to ensure that they always deliver within a certain predefined time limit, which is typically 30 minutes.
Irrespective
Yeah.
of the franchisees, Domino's or Pizza
Yeah.
Hut as a brand says
Yeah.
30 minutes or else your pizza is free. So isn't that kind of pushed down from the company and raising my expectations?
Well, it's not always a pizza is free. I mean, that is again at the discretion of both the franchise owner and so the marketing, the headquarters may have certain guidelines, right?
Okay.
The guidelines are typically enforced within what is known as, there are 2 types of stores. There's the franchisee store and there's the equity store. Equity stores are owned by the parent company. The equity stores typically follow all the corporate marketing guidelines, corporate guidelines in terms of what is free, what is not free, etc. But then there's a lot of discretion at the franchise level. In India, for instance, most of the Pizza Hut stores are owned by franchisees. So they have a lot of discretion in terms of, indicating what is free, what is not free, etc. Any other question, comment? Yes, sir.
So for your prospects, in this case, you may have data for your existing customers of Pizza Hut, but for acquisition strategy, how do you collect the data for your prospect base, or how do you define your prospect base in this case?
Okay, how do we define the prospect base? Yeah, so what we have visibility, I mean, what Capillary has visibility into is essentially customers that are transacting or coming through the door. So we do not, so in other words, all of our campaigning and messaging, etc., typically goes to either people who are currently active customers or dormant customers or lapsed customers. So in other words, you should have either transacted recently or sometime in the past. We don't have access to, let's say, competitor customer base or prospects that we really don't have any history with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So could you use, because you talked about, geospatial data that you could gather, street level or zip
Yeah,
code
yeah.
level. So can we use some of that using the, probably a census data and use that
Yeah.
as
Very difficult, very difficult. I'll tell you why. Because typically the people we are communicating or messaging to have already volunteered to give us their contact information. So for instance, the way we even have these guys in our data warehouse is because we have tagged them with their unique identifier. In India, it is typically the mobile number. When you place a pizza